Golos Tireless Pilgrim recently passed Muldrotha as the most built commander deck over the past 2 years on EDH Rec. To celebrate, we are building a 5-color Landfall Golos deck. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. If you see any cards that you would like to purchase throughout the video or want to buy the whole deck, head on over to the description and use our TCG Player affiliate link to further support Common Command. We've also got a Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram for you viewers to interact with the channel. Now let's get to the deck. Golos is 5 colorless mana for a legendary 3/5 scout. When it enters the battlefield, we get to search our library for any land and put it into play tapped. It also has the ability to pay 2 generic and Wooburg to exile the top 3 cards of our library and play them until end of turn without paying their CMC. Now Golos is so versatile and can be played so many different ways, but we've decided to build a Landfall deck because of new Landfall support from Zendikar Rising, as well as Golos being very synergistic with the deck's overall functions. He tutors us lands and has a mana sinking ability to keep us going. Now we've broken this deck down into different categories, so let's get to the first, Ramp. Ramp is especially key for this deck because the lands we get into play will trigger the other cards we have in the deck. We want to be able to get as many extra lands onto the field each turn as much as possible, from the start of the game to the end. The first 2 ramp cards we have are land-based and common command staples. Mirrored Landscape will enter tap, but we can pay 2 and sack it to get us 2 lands of the same type, essentially getting us 3 potential landfall triggers. Temple of the False God is also in the deck because it's straight up tapped for 2 mana. Now we need to have 4 other lands to activate this ability, but this deck will have no problem meeting that requirement. We've got more land-based ramp with Sakura Tribuilder, Cultivate, Kodama's Reach, Farseek, Skyshroud Claim, Colony Heart of Zendikar, Farhaven Elf, and Temple Discovery. These cards right here are the core of the deck that will get our other cards into motion. But we've got even more ramp with cards that let us play extra lands per turn to make sure that none of them get stuck in our hand. Mina and Den Wildborn, Azusa Lost But Seeking, Dryad of the Illusion Grove, the Gitrog Monster, Wayward Swordtooth, and Burgeoning will ensure that we can continue to pump out lands each turn. They've also got secondary uses. The Gitrog Monster will draw us cards when lands go to our graveyard, Dryad of the Illusion Grove will make a lands tap for any mana that we may need, and Mina and Den Wildborn can return lands to our hand to replay for more landfall triggers. But with our ramp out of the way, let's keep the gas moving with some card draw. All of the card draw we have in the deck fits perfectly into our landfall theme. Tatsiova Benedict Druid will draw us a card and gain us a life whenever a land enters. Risen Reef has a similar effect except it's with elementals. When it or another elemental enters the battlefield, we get to draw a card, but if that card would be a land, we put it into play instead. There is a major elemental sub-theme in this deck, so this can be taken advantage of big time. Nahiri's Lithoforming is a new and powerful card that lets us pay any amount into X, and in return we have to sacrifice X lands and draw that many cards. We then get to play X additional lands for turn. This card is just busted in this deck and can gain us a ton of value. Omnath Locus of the Royal will draw us a card when a land enters if we have 7 or more lands, which again should not be a problem at all. Lord Windgrace is a fantastic Lands Matters Planeswalker that lets us discard land cards to draw 2 cards, but then we can also get those lands back to the battlefield, a super strong engine if you can keep it around. Nissa Vital Force is another powerful Planeswalker that we can ultimate the next turn after casting it. It gives us an emblem that says whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, draw a card. Valakut Exploration is one of my favorites in the deck. When a land enters, we exile the top card of our library and we get to play it until end of turn. And if you don't like any of the cards you hit, you can turn them into straight damage with Valakut. Horn of Greed is another card that will draw a player a card whenever a land enters the battlefield. Yes, our opponents will get the benefit of it, but we will be abusing it that it'll be totally worth it. Now we've got more card draw with Escape to the Wilds, Trade Routes, and Tireless Tracker, but it's time to move on to our landfall support cards. Before we get into our landfall cards, we have some that will make those benefits even better. Yarok the Desecrated will double any ETB triggers and we have a ton in the deck. Ancient Green Warden will do the same, except only for any land-based triggers, which is more than enough to put it in the deck. Ashaya, Soul of the Wild will turn our creatures into lands, which will be a big help in cashing in on more landfall triggers and using them for mana. Muldrotha the Gravetide, Golos is now past EDH Rec rival, will let us play permanent cards from our graveyard, whether that be lands or key creatures that were taken out. Ramming Up Excavator, Crucible of Worlds, and Life from the Loam all do the same thing, and that's letting us get lands back from our graveyard. We really have to make sure that we have access to be able to trigger our landfall abilities. But with that, we can finally move on to our Landfall payoffs. These next bunch of cards will really push us ahead and make us a major threat for our opponents. Omnath Locus of Rage, Scoot Swarm, Rampaging Ballots, Avenger of Zendikar, Zendikar's Royal, Phylath World Sculptor, and Tatiana Protector of Argoth will make us a large amount of tokens, either when lands enter, leave, or based on how many we have. Omnath Locus of Rage will also let us bow any targets whenever an elemental dies, while Avenger of Zendikar and Phylath will pump our Saprolinks. Omnath Locus of Creation is a new card that it does so much for us. It gains us life, gives us mana, and smacks someone for 4 damage. Obnicholas the Fallen again will shock an opponent for 3 life every time a land enters, and it also gets him bigger with +1/+1 counters, which can get real nasty real fast. Amiri Shepherd will get us back permanents to our hand when a land enters the battlefield, but if that land is a plains, those permanents go straight from our graveyard to the battlefield. Royal Elemental will let us steal any problematic creatures, while Morag Fury of Akam will give us extra combats when lands enter. Worm Harvest is another big hitter that'll make us a ton of tokens based on our lands that will continue to threaten our opponents because it has Retrace. And last up, we have cards like Torment of Hellfire and Genesis Wave, because we will have so much mana each game, and these are just some ways to really abuse it. But let's not forget about our commander. For only 7 mana, we can go 3 deep into our deck and play whatever we hit for free. Another great way to use all the mana that we have. But with the main focuses of the deck taken care of, we can get into what type of protection and removal packages we are running. Our deck already has some pre-built liability with the Graveyard Recursion, but we've also got Heroic Intervention and Make a Stand to ensure our permanents stay on the battlefield after a Wrath effect. Counterspell, Negate, and Arcane Denial are classic and easy ways to protect us from any spells that threaten our position. Beast Within and Swords to Plowshare will remove anything from our opponent's end that we can't really keep up with, and Wrath of God and Supreme Verdict will reset the board in the most dire of situations. But now, since we are playing a 5-color deck, and more so that cares about lands, I decided I wanted to include my recommendation for the land base. Now, like the whole deck, this is just a reference and a guide. If you can't afford to get every 100 cards, that's totally fine. Play with what's available to you for now, and upgrade as you go. But the lands I do recommend are Command Tower and Exotic Orchard, because they are cheap and easy ways to get multiple colors that you're really going to need. Reliquary Tower will let us keep our hand if it goes beyond the maximum of 7, and Lotus Field is a really good land that can tap for 3 mana, but we have to sack 2 when it enters. Now, the new Thriving Lands from Jumpstart are a great 5-color budget land base alternative if you don't have access or means to get fetch lands and shock lands, which I highly recommend you do if you can. And since fetch lands will trigger our landfall abilities twice, we recommend you run Fabled Passage, Terramorphic Expanse, and Evolving Wilds. Ghost Town is another cool card that lets you return it to your hand on an opponent's turn to make sure that you can continue to play lands each turn. And then of course we have them temples that are at an all-time low, so why not throw in some scry lands while you're at it? Even the new dual lands from Zendikar Rising are somewhat budget-based alternatives and work really well in the deck. But with that, the deck is complete. I did intentionally leave out some cards because I want you, the viewer, to fill in some of the blanks and add in your own personal taste. Magic's only fun if you're playing with cards you enjoy. So let me know if I missed any auto-includes or how you would build your own Golos deck. Comment your responses below and be sure to like the video and subscribe to Common Command for more EDH content.